Slipways is a game that can be described with the phrase, easy to learn, difficult to master. In the game, you build a massive trade network based upon the in-universe FTL system, known as the Slipways. There's only two rules in this game. Slipways can only transport resources one jump, and no two slipways may cross. Well, sort of. This game is much more complicated than at first glance, and it is why it is the first game that I've chosen to review on this channel. Every game of Slipways starts the same way, with you picking a galaxy position and your council species. Galaxy position is just kind of this game's way of setting a seed, kind of like how you would in a Minecraft world. It is what gives it the little line of code that helps it generate the galaxy and the game space you're in. For most casual players, the galaxy position isn't going to have much of an effect on the game, but the council species you pick are going to have a much bigger impact on the game. They determine two bonuses you get through the game and what sort of technologies you can research through the game. Like I said in the intro, it's a little bit more complicated than it looks at first glance, but we'll take baby steps. Your first order of business in Slipways is to go exploring, and you launch probes through the wormhole to scout out the planets that are within range. What you are looking for is a planet that you can establish a colony on, but that also has planets around it that can fulfill the resource requirements. For instance, this ocean world here requires both minerals and food to create a population. Fortunately, there is a lava world that we can send people to mine up the resources that we need, and connecting these worlds creates a slipway that fulfills our requirements. However, we also need food, and fortunately, the ocean world can also produce food, but it requires robots. But there is a forge world nearby where we can send minerals to make robots to produce food, and there you have it, a stable loop. However, our homeworld now has a second requirement of consumer goods. Fortunately for us, all the resources that we need are nearby. There's a forge world which can turn minerals into consumer goods, and there is a lava world where we can send people to mine those minerals, creating a second stable loop. And that is the basic game loop of Slipways. Find a planet, need a resource, look for the worlds around, build stable loops and chains. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, there's a bit more to it. There are other factors that need to be taken into account. Money. You have to have your planets producing enough money so you don't go bankrupt and can no longer build. I have lost a few games that way. There is also empire-wide happiness. If you fail to provide basic resources or jobs, people get unhappy and it causes it to go down. If your happiness hits 0, you instantly are fired and lose the game. There are also council bonuses that you get from completing objectives, and empire size, meaning the more you build, the more expensive your slipways will become. So you could build a very wide empire, but the game also seems to focus on building very tall and thinking ahead. Finally, there's technology. These are created when you send populations and some resources into a lab, and it produces a research every month. Technologies are determined by which council species you picked and which other technologies you picked at the beginning of the game. Every technology gives you some sort of benefit that makes your game a little bit easier. These can be simple things, such as unlocking new ways to extract resources from your worlds, and to as far as new ways to travel across the galaxy. So what makes Slipways such a good game? Well, for starters, no two games are the same, so it has incredibly high replayability. Secondly, it has that dopamine finding loop that you get in games like Satisfactory or Factorio, but with the lack of enemies creates a much more stress-free environment. Here, your only opponents are the rising cost and the mistakes you made several turns back for short-term gain. Insert joke about government here. Another great thing is the way they do the tech system. So every council race has a set of technologies, and there's 5 council races you can choose from, but you only get 3 per game, and you don't get to choose all the technology. So you can kind of customize the game a little bit and explore. I have about 20 hours on Slipways, and I'm still finding new techs and new ways to play. A cool feature of this game is it's a turn-based system. So it's kind of like Hot Shot. The time only progresses when you do, and time is kind of seen as a little bit of a resource. So establishing colonies, slipways, those all take time, and it's an interesting resource if you're... It would also be wrong if I didn't talk about the soundtrack for this game. It is amazing. It fits really well in with the exploration and laid-back vibe. I think track number 1 reminds me quite a bit of Mass Effect music and just that little bit of wonder. Overall, I think it's a really good soundtrack, and you've been hearing some of the music throughout this whole video. However, the game does have a few, how do I politely say this, flaws or drawbacks that I don't really like, and I'll just go over them very quickly. First off is the undo system. I didn't realize that there was an undo system until a few hours of playing, which kind of changed how I played the game a little bit. I had to think through every turn and every system and like how I was building up the worlds before I had the undo, and each mistake was like, now I gotta figure out how to integrate this mistake, and it was much more problem solving. Now that I know there's an undo system, it takes that creativity out of the game a little bit. But also the undo system is a little bit unintuitive. It's you can only go back as far as you explored, which so you could do hundreds of moves within the space you explored, but then you expand outward a little bit and you realize, oh, I made a mistake. Well, too bad. I mean, I guess it makes sense from a gameplay perspective, but it's just a little bit unintuitive. The other qualm I have about the game is the way that there's different runs. You have standard runs, which only last 25 years, and that is how you unlock the other types of runs. The endless runs, which you are seeing right now, you have to get 1 star on a standard run, which isn't too bad. But when it comes to the campaign mode, you have to get 4 stars, which is a little bit of a downer because the campaign actually looks like it's kind of fun, and I would really like to play it, but it just requires a bit of luck and a lot of skill. Overall, though, these 2 qualms that I have don't really affect much of the gameplay, and I think do make sense. I will say, Slipways is a well-polished game that takes up a surprisingly small amount of stuff to run. Basically, if you have a computer that has Windows 10 or an equivalent operating system, and it has a CPU and some memory, you can run this game. I was a little bit disappointed to discover that this game is no longer in development and hasn't been for a while, but I am glad that they left it in a state that is very stable and very fun to play. There also are a few mods on the Steam Workshop, but it doesn't seem to have an active modding community. This game retails on Steam for about $16, but if you wait for like a winter sale or a summer sale, you can get it for like $8 or $4, which is what I think I did. Overall, though, I think it's a really good price for a game like this. My final thoughts are, it's a really well-polished game, endless dopamine loops, 9.4 out of 10. And that's why I recommend Slipways.